Have you ever tried to just do nothing? Like really do nothing? Just sit in a quiet room all alone with your own thoughts. It sounds so simple, but for most of us, it's actually incredibly hard, almost painful. Well, it turns out you're not alone. A 17th century French genius, a guy named Blaise Pascal, who was a mathematician, a physicist, and a philosopher, was completely obsessed with this very same question nearly 400 years ago. Okay, let's get into it. This question, right here, is at the very heart of Pascal's work. He was convinced that if we could just figure out why we have this strange fear of silence and stillness, we would unlock the secret to, well, everything, both our deep unhappiness and our incredible potential for greatness. So today, that's the mystery we're going to try to unravel, using Pascal's own powerful ideas. So, before we can understand why we're always running away from ourselves, Pascal says we first have to get a handle on our incredibly bizarre place in the universe. He calls this the human predicament. Okay, Pascal wants us to do a little thought experiment here, and it's pretty mind-bending. First, he says, think about the universe, the truly infinite universe with all its galaxies and stars stretching out forever. On that scale, our planet, our lives, we're just an insignificant speck. But then, he says, look the other way. Look inward, at the atoms that make you up and the tiny particles inside them. It's another abyss, an infinity of smallness. We are, he says, just suspended right in the middle, caught between these two infinities, and we can't truly grasp either one. And being stuck in this strange middle spot, well, it creates a huge contradiction right inside of us. On one hand, Pascal says we are the glory of the universe. I mean, think about it. We can do math, write poetry, we can love, we can understand the very cosmos that makes us feel so small. But then, on the other hand, we are its scum. And this paradox just keeps going. He says we think of ourselves as the judge of all things, these rational beings who can figure out truth and justice, and yet, at the exact same time, we're nothing more than an imbecile worm of the earth, totally driven by vanity, silly mistakes, and our most basic instincts. We're brilliant, and we're pathetic, sometimes in the very same breath. You can almost hear Pascal just throwing his hands up here in complete awe. What are we? We're a living, breathing paradox, a novelty, a monster, a total chaos, a prodigy. And for Pascal, this isn't some problem to be solved. This deep, messy contradiction is the fundamental truth of being human. So, how are we supposed to make sense of this? How can we be both the glory and the scum of the universe? Well, Pascal doesn't leave us hanging. He offers up one of the most beautiful and famous metaphors in all of philosophy to try and wrap our heads around it. Just let that one sink in for a second. A reed, like a thin plant stalk. It's fragile. It's so easily bent, so easily crushed by the elements. But this one particular reed has a quality that changes absolutely everything. It thinks. And this breaks it down so brilliantly. Pascal says, look, the whole universe doesn't need to gather its forces to crush one of us. A little bit of vapor, a single drop of water, that's all it takes. Physically, we're basically nothing. But, and this is the big but, he argues we are infinitely more noble than the very universe that kills us. Why? Because we know we are being crushed. We are aware of our own fragility, of our own death. The universe, in all its massive, powerful glory, knows absolutely nothing. So that's what he means. Our entire dignity, our glory, it doesn't come from our strength. It comes from our thought. Okay, so if we are these paradoxical thinking reeds, totally aware of our own greatness and our own impending doom, how do we cope with that every day? Well, according to Pascal, for the most part, we don't. We run. And that brings us to the biggest symptom of our condition, our desperate, constant need for distraction. And there it is. We're right back to our opening question. The real reason we can't stand being in that quiet room is because when all the noise stops, we're forced to face our true condition, our mortality, our misery, all of our contradictions, and that, frankly, is a terrifying thing to look at. Pascal even has a specific name for this, divertissement, which is just French word diversion or distraction. And listen, this isn't just about scrolling on our phones or binging a TV show. For Pascal, pretty much everything can be a diversion. Chasing that big promotion at work, gossiping with your friends, even big things like going to war or building an empire. All of these things are just ways we fill up the silence to avoid thinking about the really big, uncomfortable stuff. But here is Pascal's most mind-blowing insight about all this. He says we don't actually want the thing we're chasing. We don't want the rabbit from the hunt. We want the thrill of the hunt itself. We don't want the pile of money from the card game. We just want to play the game. The goal isn't really happiness or satisfaction. The real goal is just to be busy, to be occupied, to keep our minds so full of the hustle that there's simply no room left for that existential dread to creep in. So we've got the diagnosis. We're thinking reeds caught between infinity and nothing. And we've got the symptom. We're constantly running away into distractions. So what in the world is Pascal's prescription? This leads us straight to his most famous and, most controversial idea. Pascal frames the whole question of God's existence not as some philosophical proof, but as a bet, a wager. He says our reason, our logic alone, it just can't solve this. There's an infinite chaos separating us from the answer. But here's the kicker. You don't get to sit this one out. Not choosing is a choice in itself. As he says, you are on board the ship. You have to play the game. All right, let's look at the betting table. It lays it out perfectly. Let's say you bet that God exists. If you're right, what do you get? An infinite gain, eternal life, infinite happiness, the whole shebang. If you're wrong, well, what have you really lost? A few worldly pleasures, maybe? It's a finite, measurable loss. Now let's flip it. Say you bet that God does not exist. If you turn out to be wrong, you face an infinite loss. But if you're right, your gain is a finite life and then nothing. So when you look at it this way, just as a cold, hard, pragmatic bet, Pascal's conclusion is blunt. It's just logical. You've got a chance at infinite gain versus a finite loss. To any rational gambler, the choice is a no-brainer. You wager that God exists. It is the only bet that makes any sense when the stakes are literally infinite. But hold on. Pascal was way too brilliant to think that this simple bet was the end of the story. For him, this was just the beginning. The wager isn't really about cold logic. It's about what you do when logic hits a wall. And this is the real point of the wager. It's not a mathematical proof for God's existence. It's a tool. It's designed to kind of shock us out of our indifference, to show us that pure reason can only take us so far, and to nudge us to take a different kind of step. Pascal even suggested that if you find it hard to believe, you should just act as if you believe. Go to church, follow the rituals. He argued that doing this would quiet the passions and doubts that block belief, and maybe, just maybe, open up a different path to understanding. And this leads us to what is maybe his most powerful and enduring idea. For Pascal, there are basically two ways of knowing things. There's reason, which gives us logic and proofs. But then there's the heart. Our intuition, our gut feelings, our deepest sense of things. And the heart has its own way of knowing truth. Some of the most fundamental things we believe, like the fact that we even exist, we don't prove them with logic. We just feel them. We know them in our heart. So in the end, Pascal's wager brings us right back to where we started, that quiet, uncomfortable room. All our distractions, all our constant hustling, that's a bet too, isn't it? It's a bet that whatever we're chasing is more important than facing the biggest questions of our existence. So Pascal's challenge is as powerful today as it was 400 years ago. He forces us to ask ourselves, in a world with more distractions than ever, what are you betting your one precious finite life on?